Hello again, everyone. My name is Nick Sramek, here again with another episode of What's Next in the Doon Insights podcast, where we interview and speak to interesting early stage startup founders and innovators that are doing something interesting in a few different technological verticals that we operate in. So today we are looking at the agri-food tech sector, and I have two guests with me, Amy Wu, who is an author and journalist, and author of the book From Farms to Incubators, which came out in 2021, and is also currently doing a series of portraits of female-led startups in the ag food tech industry. I also have Shely Aronov, who is the founder of Inner Plant, and Shely, welcome, and Amy, welcome to both of you. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So maybe Amy, I could just turn to you first. And so your book came out in 2021, which was a really interesting set of interviews and portraits of women in the ag food tech space. And love to hear about what you've been doing since that book came out and your plans going forward.
Yeah, so From Farms to Incubators has always been about storytelling and telling the stories of women innovators and entrepreneurs in the space of ag tech, and that's extended to agri-food tech. So we have had a documentary, and you mentioned the book in 2021. So what has been happening more recently is we've extended the stories to a portrait series. Actually, Shely is one of them. And we choose a diversity of women, not just obviously geographically and in terms of ethnicity, but in terms of their innovation, right? So there's all kinds of a broad spectrum of innovation that tackles farming challenges. So the goal or the mission of it is to document their challenges and the opportunities that they've had, their journey. And the greater mission is to inspire younger people, young women, especially, to consider opportunities in the food and ag innovation space. Traditionally, it's been a pretty male-dominated sector in terms of farming, agriculture, but a lot of that is changing because we have a new generation of women who are certainly, interested in contributing to the food ecosystem, making a difference. But at the same time, a lot of them happen to be in science, technology, engineering, and math. And then I'd say the second part of this is that we're wanting to connect, using the stories to connect women in the space. To create a community, right? So the more portraits we have, the more stories we have, the more folks reading it, the more that they're reaching out to that particular person, or saying, do you know of somebody who's interested in connecting with them? It could be investors, it could be farmers, it could be academics. So that's the sort of the next phase, or the current phase and the next phase. From Farms to Incubators.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I think you're leaning into a few different trends that we're seeing. Of course, more women coming out of STEM programs and looking to get into we're either working with early stage companies or founding their own companies, and we're also seeing LPs understanding more about the importance of diversity in the companies that they back, and there's a whole host of benefits associated with that. So I think you're really just at the beginning of this groundswell that we're seeing that's pushing the industry forward, pushing investors to look at the companies they invest in a new way, and looking for value adds so that they can be competitive in an increasingly competitive investment environment. Great. So it sounds like From Farms to Incubators has evolved from a book, and now it is a living thing. So this is an ongoing project, I take it?
It is an ongoing project. There are really no deadlines. I mean, I guess if I could wave my magic wand, we'd have almost every woman, not just in the U.S., but internationally, all the continents. We would tell their stories, and I do know that there are women all over the world engaged in agri-food tech. I've interviewed some women, certainly, for example, in Singapore, the Asia Pacific area, which I'm more familiar with, but then it also goes to the Middle East. I mean, basically any place where people are eating and farming, there's the development of innovation in all different respects. So I think we're going to take it story by story and portrait by portrait. We also have an internship program where I have some women of university, in university who are really interested and share a similar vision and mission. So they've also been engaged in interviewing in the storytelling aspect. And I almost forgot to mention that there's a directory called the Women in Agri-Food Tech Directory that I and a group of other women in the space have pulled together our quote unquote ingredients, all of our contacts, put it together in this table. It's on a shareable, searchable Airtable. And there's more than about 800 plus names now of women in the agri-food tech space, a lot of them in the US and also internationally, globally, that have put their names, their contacts, their photos there in the hopes that they can connect with others in the space. So I do want to highlight that directory as well. Yeah.
Thanks, Amy. Really appreciate that. And any female founders out there in the ag food tech space that don't know Amy yet, you definitely should. So reach out to me and I'll put you guys in touch. So I want to turn over to Shely. So thanks so much for joining us today. So your company is tackling what I think is one of the most important challenges of the day, and that's how to feed a growing population globally while also reducing the use of pesticides, preserving topsoil, and reducing water usage. So this is a very tall order for any one company, but I would love to hear a little more about how Interplant is looking to tackle this important issue.
Sure. Thanks, Nick. So let's start. I think we'll start with, first of all, I completely agree, right? These are the things that we need to solve for. And our approach is we have a great system in large scale agriculture, meaning we have a system that can feed a growing population. We have, successful, resilient yields, but they come at a relatively large cost that we now fully understand, right? This idea of farming thousands of acres and treating each plot as essentially hundreds of acres at a time, broadcasting chemistry, is not the most efficient way we can do things. It's the most efficient way we could do things until recently. So now we're seeing a transition towards what we believe is going to be the future, individualized plant care. And it's a whole ecosystem, but for us, it starts with the plants themselves. We need to understand what exactly what are the crop needs in order to better protect and nurture them. So what we do at Interplant is we enable plants to communicate what they need. And we do this by tapping into the native reactions that plants already have to react to their environment, meaning the way they react when they're attacked by fungus pressure, insect pressure, or they don't have enough nitrogen and things like that. And then we recode the crop. So this is literally a line of code in the seed to start producing a new protein as in addition to that reaction. Meaning now we're going to have seeds that when you plant them, if there's a fungal infestation, they're going to start producing a new protein, and that protein will create an optical signal that is picked up all the way from satellites to tractors and everything in between. The idea here is farmers will be planting these seeds. We're focusing on soybean and corn and large crops because that's where there's a lot of impact. But then that information needs to be embedded into a better farming system. And then the future is we can understand every small plot, starting from the satellite imagery, which is very scalable and affordable, and then taking that same information, embedding it into the equipment so that the equipment can go out to the field and apply individually on every plant, which is something that we're seeing capabilities from all the See and Spray systems being able to provide. This is going to be much better results yield-wise, and it's going to mean a reduction in chemistry because we won't need the misuse of pesticides. We won't need the over-application of fertilizers. We'll just be able to treat the plants based on their needs.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And when I was reading up a little bit about what Interplant does, it struck me that it seems like Interplant is part of what I may call the third wave of ag tech. So the first wave would be the arrival of GMOs, where we basically tell plants what to do. The second wave could be seen as the rise of IoT and precision ag, where we are able to listen to what plants are telling us. And what you're doing seems to be more of a conversation between plants and plants, which is seems to be revolutionary, to say the least.
I mean, the reality is that the only way to really understand crops is to communicate with them on the biological level. Plants react incredibly fast to their environment, usually within a few hours, but we won't be able to see it for weeks. So in order to shorten that gap, the way to do it is essentially biotech.
That's fascinating. Yeah, and what you just mentioned, sort of the reduction of inputs to crops, which speaks to this this issue around how to build companies that are both good for the environment as well as good for the pocketbook of investors and the founders and your
Farmers.
customers.
Yeah.
Farmers as well. That's right. And this is sort of been an intractable problem for a long time. It's you could either help the farmers by increasing the use of fertilizers and inputs and reducing the quality of their topsoil, or you could do things that are good for the environment. But we've just seen this whole wave of companies that are able to do both. And I think that's where we've seen the investor response just tick up so much, because they understand that this is something that the consumers want. It's something that the farmers want. They want to be able to see their farmers, their farm grow for the next 100 years. And so because of that, a whole host of solutions have come out that are both economically viable for investors, but also really good for the planet. So I'd love to hear about how you see Interplant playing in that role of being both part of the economic ecosystem as well as the environmental ecosystem we operate in.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's always customer first. And my background is very much business, industry. It's always about unit economics. It's always about scalability. We wanted from the onset to build something that could work on a large scale, because you won't get the environmental impact if you only get 5% adoption. You get the environmental impact when you get 95% adoption. So the idea is, how do you do that? And how and we looked at it, like, what were technologies in the past that had that adoption, right? Genetically engineered seeds, GPS steering tractors. There's always the same theme, which is it increases productivity while reducing risk. And that's the key to us. So the concept is, we have so many inefficiencies in our system. We want to eliminate them. What's missing is this new data set that enables us to do that without increasing risk for farmers, because it's not a trade-off that they can take. And then everything we do basically falls into that. It's like the farmers want to get higher yields and reduce their pesticides and fertilizer use, right? And they want to do it without additional risk. So we have to build an entire ecosystem that can provide them that system that provides all of the benefits without the risk. And if you can do that, then you can get the adoption and you can get your customer satisfaction and you can get them excited about this. We've had farmers essentially on a wait list, a paid wait list from 2 years ago now, because they want to see this technology come to market, because they understand the advantages to them. But it also happens that what's good for them is good for the environment. And I think this is kind of the magic, is we understand that we need to get farmers off the treadmill of pesticides. And if we can do that, the environment is going to thrive, right? If we can reduce the use of the toxic chemistry and use the least amount that you need, the environment will thrive. The topsoil will come back, right? The biodiversity will come back. So it kind of all goes hand in hand, but I would say we've always been customer first and then the impact, because the customers will drive the adoption that will then drive the impact. And if the customers are not interested, you're not going to get to where you want to go.
And I think this is a problem that a lot of ag tech companies have had recently, is they work too much on the impact and don't necessarily speak to the customers first. So the farmers are sort of being talked over in many ways.
Yes, and it drives me crazy, because at the end of the day, you're either going to make your customers excited or not, right? And I also, I have another narrative, which is we don't really focus as much on consumers. And it doesn't mean that we don't want to share what we do. We very much want to share what we do with consumers, but at the end of the day, they will never interact with our product. So we got to remember that our customers are the farmers and the industry that works within this. And then eventually, animal feed and oil production and jet fuel. This is where soybean and corn go. So we got to work within this world and sell to our actual customers. And then we can do a good job of communicating to everyone else. But, I read this in this, one of this VC books. You only have one customer. You have to know who that customer is, and you have to focus on that customer. You can serve a lot of other stakeholders, but you have one customer. For us, it's the farmers.
That's good advice. I like it. So Shely, as a female founder in 2023, so you were profiled by Amy, and you've been working in the space for quite some time. I feel like the pandemic has really, shifted our understanding of what work looks like for so many different people. And now we're emerging from that. And I think so much of our life has changed fundamentally and permanently throughout the last 3 years. Have you seen a shift in how women are working in ag and food tech over the past few years? Are you seeing it in one direction or the other more so? Or what sort of shifts have you seen as you've been working in this space?
I definitely see an increase in women. I don't necessarily see an increase in women in leadership roles. And I think that's what we want to enhance and mentor towards, right? STEM has a lot of women. Our lab has a ton of women. I'm very excited about that. But we want to focus on also making sure that we get women into leadership roles. And for some reason, that is the thing that is still harder to do. It's funny, I've been thinking about this over the years. Amy asked me this question probably 2 years ago when we first met, and my answer was, I don't see a difference. Like being a woman fundraising versus a man fundraising, well, I don't know what it feels like to be a man fundraising, right? That was my initial onset. Like, I don't want to even see the difference because I don't want to feel like I have a handicap. And then the next thing was like, okay, I'm seeing the difference now. And I think the biggest difference, which was my 2.0 on all of this, is with men, the focus is on opportunity. With women, the focus is on risk. And with venture capital, the last thing you want to talk about is risk, risk, risk. You want to talk about opportunity. I think it's just easier for everyone, whether they're male or female, to listen to a man talk about opportunity than a woman. So that was kind of the next iteration. And I think where I landed now is that overall, the challenge we have is that we work in a men's world. And I think that's just kind of the baseline of where I'm at right now. We've only had women really incorporated into business at the highest levels in the last 50 years. And until that point, it was completely men-oriented. It still is. And it's going to take a long time. I mean, at this point, I kind of don't believe I'm going to see this transition in my lifetime, because it's going to take a long time until we start seeing maybe feminine traits as leadership traits versus masculine traits. And if we constantly have to essentially find a way to work within the men's world, then there is a handicap and there's no way around it, right? And at the end of the day, it's hard for me to not notice that many, many, many times I'm the only woman in the room, right? With leadership, with executives, with CEOs, with venture capitalists. It's just at some point you notice, and I think a lot of people notice that, right? So, I mean, whatever it is we can do, and that's something that I think about a lot, but we got to get more women into leadership positions because it's the only way that it's going to change. It's not enough to say, well, we have 50% women, but it's all the entry level. It has to be something different, right?
Yeah, interesting. And Amy, maybe I could bring you in on that question as well. For something like the 15th straight year, there's been more women earning PhDs in STEM than men. But last time I checked, according to the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, only 22% of startups globally are founded by women. Now, I think the statistic is higher inside the US, but it's still very low compared to the number of skilled technical graduates that are coming out of top universities. So, Amy, as you've profiled and spoken to dozens or hundreds of female founders in ag and food tech, why do you think there isn't as many as there should be? And two, of the startup founders that you speak to, what are some characteristics that they have that you think allow them to succeed in a traditionally male-dominated space?
I think some of the commonalities among the women who I profiled, before and currently, certainly is a belief that what the product and the innovation that they have works, obviously, and makes a difference in I would say the greater food ecosystem. I see that a lot of the women entrepreneurs, that I speak with, it goes beyond just, okay, I'm a business owner, I'm an entrepreneur, I have this product. I mean, there's this other level of wanting to actually contribute to the food system. I also see that there's obviously persistence and tenaciousness because this is a challenging space to raise money in. And I think the environment now is very, very challenging to raise money in general. So I think there's a creativity with that also, maybe looking beyond the traditional routes of funding or fundraising and looking at other opportunities, to, whether that be with grants or ones that are tied to education, and maybe collaborating with academic institutions. And then also, I would say that a good number of them actually don't come from farming. I'm asked that a lot, from the general public. They all think that women in ag tech have been farmers, or somehow have come from generations of farming. And that's not true. I think that a lot of them actually have a background in math and technology and STEM, basically. And so I think that that's another commonality. And then I would say that, interestingly enough, a lot of them don't necessarily have a record of starting other companies. So there are serial entrepreneurs. There are a good portion, I think, that where this is their first or second foray into launching a startup, which I think is really wonderful. I mean, I think a lot of the entrepreneurs are in their 20s and 30s, and there may be some just straight out of college, and they're seeing an opportunity in this space. So the second question is, where do I see it going? Right? There are anecdotally, I think, a lot more women that I'm seeing either as co-leading or leading in ag tech companies. And this is not just in the US, but globally. And I think there's been a lot more attention placed on food and farming, especially driven since the pandemic. I think most people now have maybe some loose interest, if not keen interest, in where their food is grown, how it's grown, having experienced maybe food shortages, or maybe the different problems with the supply chain on the consumer end of things. And yet I think the challenges that were identified maybe 7 or 8 years ago when I started this remain. There's still this funding conundrum, I think, of women founded, led companies being able to get the funding to run the companies and to build a team that's so important, I feel like, for really any business. But on the flip side of that, there's a growing number of accelerators or incubators, which didn't exist maybe 15, 20 years ago. And those programs offer financial resources, mentorship, connections with, whether that be attorneys, IP attorneys, whether that be other entrepreneurs, whether that be farmers, so a network to start with. So that's what I'm seeing a lot, with the women that I've talked to, is that they've gotten a jump start, or, the beginning starts with getting in maybe an accelerator program, or getting early funding through that as well.
Interesting. So, as Shely said, it's a slow moving movement, but hopefully we're seeing a groundswell of accelerators, incubators, mentorship programs, and networks, like from farms to incubators, to allow for others to see the success of their peers, and then not be I wouldn't say fearful of, but not be reticent to jump into early stage tech, which is full of risk, but also full of opportunity. Great. Well, and Shely, just maybe to end on you. So what's next for Interplant? What do you have in store for 2023?
A lot of things. Let's see. So we are working on our first product, which is the soybean fungal sensor. This is a soybean that will signal optically when it's attacked by fungus, and we'll have some of this in our field trial this year, and additional greenhouse and growth chamber trials. Working on our first satellite launch with a partner. So that's going to be announced soon what the partner is, and we are looking to launch a satellite in September, and then be able to look at our plants from space, 10 acres of soybeans that we're going to plant in Argentina. And then also working with John Deere on the solution to read the signals from the equipment itself, so they can act on what the crops need. And alongside that, signing some seed companies. So we just started working with a couple of seed companies, and we're talking to some others. We really want to continue to grow the ecosystem bring more partners on board so that we build this full solution that's better and less risky and not just provide the data. And the last thing is we have our first conference for Croptastic, which is our kind of community, and it's actually called Inner Circle, and the conference is Croptastic, and it's happening in June. So for any farmers, if you have any farmers listening or people that are fascinated, want to be in Iowa and listen to kind of the future of ag, we have a bunch of farmers and industry people. We're going to be there in June doing that. So you can find it on our website.
Good. Sounds great. And I'll put those links in the description as well. But and with that, I think I'll wrap it up. Amy, Shely, thank you both so much for your time today, and really looking forward to meeting you both in person one day soon.
All right. Thank you. Thanks so much.